This is a tutorial video on how to do testing and inferences with two populations in Minitab, and this is two independent samples. So to compare the two independent samples, you need to first input the two variables. Now we're using data from earlier in the packet in this example. In my edition of the packet, it's page 185, but that might be a little different for you. So the information for producers, which is prod in this case, goes in column C1, and the information for the competitors, or comp in this case, goes in column C2. Now we then go to stat, basic statistics, and then to sample t. Now since we have each sample in its own column, we have to click that option. And then for sample 1, we're going to use the producer's information, and then sample 2 would be the competitor's information. Now to make sure that everything else regarding our test is correct, we have to click on options. Now the base level of confidence is 95, which is perfect because that's what we're going to be using. And the base hypothesized difference is 0, which we all are also going to be using, which is great. Now, for this example, we do need to change our alternative hypothesis to the difference is greater than the hypothesized difference. Now, this is really important to double check that this matches up with your order and what you are testing for. So make sure you read the instructions very carefully for each problem to make sure that's correct. Now we also need to click on assume equal variance. This will not always be checked, so you need to double check that if you're using two populations. That's very, very, very important. So now that this is all done, we can click OK and click OK again. And as you can see, we now have our two sample t-tests and our confidence interval for prod and comp. The top of the output, Minitab gives you the means, the standard deviations, and the standard errors of each sample. And next on the difference line, you can see it uses the specific order to subtract the means. So that's going to be sample 1 minus sample 2. So that's really important. Make sure that your order matches up. And it gives you the sample, the difference of the sample means, which is here 5.8. So in this case, that's the x bar of the producer's information minus the x bar of the competitor's information. Since this is an upper-tailed test, it only gives you a 95% lower bound for the difference between the means. So that's what we have here. The t-value is our t-calc, which in this case is 2.21, and the p-value is 0.029. Now, in order to decide whether we reject or accept the null hypothesis, you need to compare the p-value to your alpha level. So our p-value is 0.029, and our alpha level is 0.05, so our p-value is less than our alpha value, which means we would reject the null hypothesis. Now, finally, our pooled standard deviation is right here, 4.15. This is the square root of the pooled variance, which is very important, as we know, when we're doing the tests ourselves. Now, Minitab can also give you a confidence interval that is two-tailed if you want. But if you have a one-tailed test, the output will be corresponding upper or lower bound. Now, if you want a two-tailed confidence interval, you go back to stat, basic statistics, and then to sample t. And this is all the same, but you have to go to options, and then for your alternative hypothesis, you need to click difference is not equal to the hypothesized difference. Once you have that, you can click OK, and it will give you some new information. So now this is the two sample t-test, and it will give us a, let me scroll to it, a 95% confidence interval for difference, and as you can see, this is now two-tailed. It's important to know that Minitab does not have the large sample z-test for the differences between means. If you choose the t-test but do not click on the assume equal variances button, you will get a value that is equal to z-calc, but the p-value will not be correct. Now that's important to keep in mind because you want to make sure that all of your information is correct when you get Minitab outputs, and just to ensure that you get the right answer.